I think hyperinflation is all about to eliminate the middle class, uh, and you everybody either poor or if you're rich, you're rich. You're not gonna change your status. If you're already rich, they stay rich, but the middle class disappear, and I think that's one of my major concerns here in America because I think that's what they're going after the middle
Oh,
class.
I am so excited today because I have Alejandro, who I met at an event, a George Gammon event in Miami, and he came specifically to see me and give me a 20,000 Bolivar bill. And today we are going to be talking about his experiences living through hyperinflation in Venezuela. I'm so glad to have you here, Alejandro. Thank you so much for coming today. Alejandro, first of all, I would really like to thank you for being here today. I think it's critically important for our viewers and for even not our viewers, but for everybody to understand what it's like living in hyperinflation and also what you're seeing in the US today that may or may not be reminiscent of what you went through living in Venezuela as the hyperinflation was building.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on. Uh, well, it's been many shows that I've been listening to it, but it's kind of funny because when I found out about your YouTube channel, you were the first one who mentioned about Venezuela.
Oh, I've been following
There are some other
Venezuela.
channels, but it's very common that they mention Argentina, they mention Turkey, they mention Zimbabwe, but no many reference about Venezuela. Which you took my attention. You were the first one that I actually point out Venezuela, and we are the one who has the highest hyperinflation level in the whole entire world.
Yes.
But things are unfolding really quick in the United States. It's unbelievable the times that we're having here in America. Uh, the things that happen in Venezuela also happen very quick. Uh, it happened by changing the constitution. Back in 1999, when Hugo Chavez reached out to the presidency,
Mm-hmm.
he changed the constitution, opened up the term levels. He can basically be reelected anytime he wants to, just like regimes do all the time. As far as the economy, everything happened like first they take control of the media. So I believe we're already there.
Yeah.
So they control the narrative at the beginning before they get in power. It's very inclusive. Like they care about the poor people, they want to unite people, that kind of stuff. Then when they take control of the media, for some reason they start looking ways to split the communities by races, by women, by anything that they came out with. That way, society is not inclusive. They trying to split everybody.
Is that so they can point a finger, well, it's this group that's doing this or making this happen, or, and also divide and conquer? What do you think?
Yeah, the whole idea is basically making sure that people will be not on the same page, that they be in different directions, and people will start fighting between each other. Uh, that's kind of how they start playing. Some people believe on the system.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that happened like in Cuba. You still have people who live down there and they believe in the system. They believe living the way they live over there is normal. There's also Venezuela regime has been there for over what 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
So there are some youngest people that they don't know any other way to live that the way they living now down there because the only thing they know.
Yeah.
So for them it's normal the way they live the life that they're living down there. But it's funny like. They coming out right now with this CBDC,
Yes.
uh, and it happened in Venezuela too that they came out with pricing controls because the food was so high. So the government trying to do something about it that opened up the black market. So if you wanted to buy goods and services, anything basically you had to buy like a hiding at a high price, nobody can see you, that kind of stuff. It took my attention because if the CBDC being placed, they don't really have to control prices. They can control the demand of the products. So basically, they give an allowance per items, per family, just like they do in Cuba. It's just they don't do it digitally; they do it manually.
Right. Well,
In Venezuela,
can we back up for just a second because you made a
sure.
comment about the government then putting caps on things and trying to control the prices, and we're seeing that happen in Europe right now, right? Where they're talking about putting caps on all these prices. So can you go into that a little bit more?
Well, same thing happened in Venezuela. So they create institutions trying to making sure that the prices that they were allowed to sell those products were in place. But when those things start happening, what happens is basically the food become disappear. All the shelves become empty because the people that are selling those products, they're not gonna sell without any making any profit.
Right?
So it doesn't make sense at all. So that's when you open up the black market for food, for certain services. So people will still be able to get those things, but in a different manner. That happened down there in Venezuela.
Do you feel like putting those price caps on it actually made it worse?
Of course, it made it worse because if you wanted to find medicine or important items for your regular uh, food, grocery shopping, you're not able to find them. Especially like happened here, baby formula, that kind of stuff. That happened down there too at the beginning. Right now, it's different. Now in Venezuela, even though they had the Bolivar as a national tender currency, they use US dollars. So now everything is a lot of different because everything is sold in dollars,
Well,
even though Bolivar is the national currency.
and also in the outlier counties or places in Venezuela, they actually price things in gold too.
They do. Those are the like states that are close to mines of gold, that kind of stuff, and they do. But they were doing that also when the currency become very dysfunctional.
Mm-hmm.
When you have to have so many bills in order to buy just a candy bar or a coffee, you have to have so many bills packed together. At one point, they were even just basically testing the weight of the bills so they
Yeah.
know more or less how much amount they have in there because it was so many bills that they were not able to count it. It was too many. So that happened over there too. Also, I remember people on their fixed income in
Mm-hmm.
Venezuela, like teachers, some doctors, depending the field that you work on, those people disappear or those people don't want to do those jobs anymore. So we had
Oh,
a deficit back then because their salaries were not enough to sustain their standard of living. So those people start redoing other activities, trying to survive during this economy. And of course, now we have the immigration problem, which it took my attention that now we have the chairman Powell trying to raise interest rate to cool down the economy, to control the demand. But in the other hand, we have open borders allowing too many immigrants coming over that they're gonna require goods and services, and that creates inflation as well.
wow.
When we don't have the goods and services under control, as it's happening here right now, I don't think we haven't fixed the channel of food. Or there are still certain items that is still hard to find here, at least here in Florida. I don't know over there
Like
in Arizona.
what?
Well, mostly like products, mechanic for auto parts. I
Right.
will say air conditions,
Okay.
some filters. Believe it or not, I was trying to find out the AC filter for my air conditioning unit. I was not able to find it. But at the same time, it's kind of tricky. Like they playing double narrative. In one side, they're trying to kill the demand, but in the other ones, it's just basically without immigration controls, it's gonna open more because those people are gonna demand goods and services.
Right. So is there a social net in Venezuela that increased to help people survive, and be able to afford food or anything else. And those immigrants, are they in that system as well?
Well, the government they implement some social programs. The most common one is one that is called the clap bots. It's called, that's how they call it down there. And basically is they provide certain items in a monthly basis. So people can buy for a lower price. They subsidize the products pretty much. So those are the products that people can buy over there to survive. But this is very small amount of products. There's not enough product for you to have for a month. But that's how people eat over there. Sometimes they only have one meal at a day, trying to making sure those
Sure.
products last for the entire month.
I
But that's
think,
how they
yeah,
go
I,
ahead.
I was going to I was going to say, I think that we're seeing that a lot here now, as food prices, and globally, as food prices are going up, people are spending the same, in this country, number of dollars, but they're buying less and trying to make it stretch longer.
Yes, I wish we had someone, and I wanted to thank you for the work that you do
Oh,
over there in Venezuela before all those things happening, because nobody knew, nobody see it coming, and when it came, and nobody was prepared for it.
yes.
So at least now you've been trying to wake up people and make them aware about the situation and that they're still in their purchasing power on a daily basis. Now people start seeing it. But I don't think we are in the phase of hyperinflation where people start getting rid of the money as soon as they get it.
Not yet.
I don't think we're not there yet.
Correct.
But people start kind of understanding like they see inflation as a price rising prices, but they don't understand it, especially in the Latin community. I wish we have a better message because I think they're gonna be suffering the most because they're the one that they don't have more financial uh, education. They don't understand this. This is different.
Yeah.
And
Well,
this is a global crisis,
oh,
and it's combined with different. It has a mix of a little bit of everything. It has an energy crisis. It has a currency crisis. We have a government crisis. So it's gonna be interesting. I think the end game is gonna be social unrest.
mhm.
I'm glad that United States had the Second Amendment. That a lot of people, I think, they will fight for their liberty and their constitutions.
I hope so.
And
Some
but
will,
I think
some won't.
I believe that's how it's gonna end. Uh, because Venezuela we tried, but we don't have that culture of buying guns or that kind of stuff. We didn't have that. Some people did, but not many. So we tried, we protest, we did a lot of stuff, but it didn't work.
It you
Unfortunately.
know it's kind of interesting, but just listening to you. So, were there signs that people just ignored leading up to the hyperinflation?
Well, yes. See, the thing is, Venezuela, for example, they did three conversions of the currency.
Yes, they did.
I know you are aware of it. Some people
And
don't.
you gave me that bill, that
Yes,
$20,000 or 20,000
Bolivar.
Bolivar
Yeah.
bill, which has more value as a napkin for an empanada, doesn't it?
Yes. So when those regimes is getting place, the first thing that they're also trying to control is the currency going out of the country.
Yes.
So that happened in Venezuela. So when they get in power, the first thing that they did is basically they block the amount of money that you can pull out of the country. So that was one of the first measurement that they took back then. And then we started experiencing inflation. They added so many zeros to a currency, you know the history. And then they do the bank holiday that you always mention about it. It happened on Sunday when they do those type of thing. They announce the reconversion, which is basically sometimes 1 to 3 or 1 to 5, depending on the situation. And they give you maximum amount of money that you can spend on that day. because after they do the announcement, it's usually at nighttime.
Of
People
course.
start trying to spend whatever they can so they can at least trying to save some purchasing power of whatever money they have in the bank. But that doesn't work either. I mean, people try, but at the beginning, people didn't know, didn't have a clue. Then they start having controls also on the maximum amount of money that you can pull out of the bank. That happened too in Venezuela. So a lot of people believe on the bank system that their money, they can get it whenever they want to. It doesn't happen that way. That happened in Venezuela. So and then we had a control on the maximum amount we can pull out of the money in the bank, and also with the wire transfers. They put limits on a daily basis and the quantity. I think you were not allowed to do more than three, something like that.
So can I ask you then how now you no longer live in Venezuela, but
No.
how did the wealthy transfer their money out of Venezuela? I mean, if you went to say Miami, you could travel, right? You could wear a lot of gold or you could carry some gold and silver in your pockets or but do you know how they did that?
Yeah. Well, a lot of them see the dollar as a hedge. So a lot of them start changing their money with US dollar, which is kind of tricky, because right now Venezuela is everything about dollar, but they don't understand that the dollar is going through the same process as the Bolivar was back then.
Thank you for
Well,
bringing that up.
yes, so not many people realize that the US dollar also loses purchasing power. They still feel that the dollar is stable. They see it as a stable currency. So that's what they use down there. But I'm sorry, can you
So
rephrase me?
yes, how did do you know? You may or may not know this, but how
Oh
the
yeah.
wealthy because there's always people that have money, right? So how did the wealthy in Venezuela get their money out or get some of their wealth out of Venezuela?
Yes, most of them they start transferring their business to different countries. That was the first thing that they did. Some of them. I know some people that they start carrying jewelry in the belts with gold because that was higher amount of gold. You're not allowed to pull that quantity out of the country. So they did in different ways. But the number one was US dollar because they see the US dollar as a stable currency. So even right now in our days, right now they still use the US dollar down there.
So you still have a family in Venezuela?
Yes, I do.
So in January, the world was told that Venezuela had finally broken the hyperinflation. Although when you look at the official numbers, they're still well over 50% a month. But can you address, or do you know from your family members that still live there, what's going on right now, even?
Well, you still have inflation, but now the inflation instead of being with Bolivar currency is through US dollars.
Ah,
So,
okay.
so instead of you experiencing inflation with Bolivar, you do it through dollars. So if you have let's say a car battery used to be $100, instead of be $100, now it's $120. And we also, I will say that down there they have also some sort of stagflation because certain items, the ones that people demand the most, those are the ones that have inflations. The
Oh,
items that people they don't require most, those are the ones that actually uh, it's not that expensive.
we see the same thing here. I was reading an article from one of the government agencies on caviar that is not inflated at the same level as meat, but they're both in the food category. So instead of getting a real read on what people buy and actually use every day, it makes food inflation look a whole lot less for that same reason, or at least when they announce the official numbers.
Yeah, the same thing happened over there. Certain meats were more expensive than other. Of course, the ones that are lower prices, those are the ones that people were buying because
Right?
they cannot afford to buy the regular ones. And of course, they start changing behavior in their entire life, how you behave, as far as cutting your budget, trying to see how you can basically expand your resources with less. So a lot of people is experiencing that in Venezuela as well.
Well, one of the things that I noticed, let's go back to food because typically during hyperinflationary events, food and then medicine become the single most important thing for most people.
Yeah.
Okay. And
It's good that you bring that up because, for example, like health insurance is one of the industry that disappeared during the hyperinflation without the dollar. Now they bring them back, but you have to pay them in US dollars, and they cover certain limit in dollars. But during the hyperinflation with bolivars, some people had health insurance, but because of the hyperinflation, whatever their coverage was not able to cover for their treatments. On a daily basis, the prices for procedure were more expensive because of the medicine, because of the labor, everything. So at one point, I will say that not many people had a health insurance because it was worthless what they were covering versus the amount of the cost for the procedures down there. As far as the food goes, some people, like I say, they opt out for the social programs from the government where they buy the clap bots, and that's basically how all they can afford to buy that bots is it's less than 1 month supplies.
so, but I want to kind of go, I want to dig into that a little bit more in that, the, the people, at what point, I have no idea how you're going to answer this, but at what point were the people discouraged from providing their own food? Because I know once they got to a point, particularly in the cities, all of a sudden they're supposed to have chickens and they're supposed to raise gardens and things like that. And here in this country, most people are clearly dependent on the grocery stores and that infrastructure. So, can you kind of relate those two things?
Well, this happened during the stage when the government bring the price control and people are not able to find things on the shelf.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when the people start become more imagine what they can do in order to survive. So
Mm-hmm.
some people start getting their a little farms, or people start getting chicken, as you say. It's depending what type of property they have. Also, not everybody was able to do the same thing. My uncle, he had lime trees, they had tomato trees, they have onions trees, lettuce tree, and they have also some chicken as well. So a lot of the portion of their regular meals were provided by their own jar.
Yes.
But not everybody was able to do that. Certain people of the population, not everyone.
So is that like the higher level socioeconomic level? Because I know also in Venezuela, abject poverty grew to 90%. I didn't say
Yeah,
100%, but
I don't
90%.
think. I think hyperinflation is all about to eliminate the middle class, and everybody either poor, or if you're rich, you're rich. You're not gonna change your status. If you're already rich, they stay rich. But the middle class disappear, and I think that's one of my major concerns here in America, because I think that's what they're going after, the middle
Oh,
class.
we've
Yeah.
been watching the destruction of the middle class really since about 2000. That's actually, it's slower with the advent of Amazon and the unequal playing field. They didn't have to charge taxes. They'd go in and undercut because Wall Street kept supporting them. So, and then certainly through 2008, that was a huge, obvious hit to the middle class. And then since 2020, another huge, huge. I mean, there's not much middle class left here, unfortunately.
Yeah, I also like to point out, I had a $70,000 in a student loan that I had to work double extra shift to pay them off. So I feel so happy when I paid them off. I was very happy. And now that I start listening this, that they're gonna just basically give them $10,000 to $20,000 in student loan credit, uh, that's just basically taking purchasing power from them. They don't realize because that's just basically trying to that's just promoting basically inflation.
We,
People think that they believe that they're helping them, but in reality, they're just taking their purchasing power away. Some people see it, some people don't,
yeah,
and
I'm not
that's the
so sure
problem
that
with it.
that's helping, but you know, it.
Yeah,
What I think that what that happens to be about is the ability for people that are saddled with that debt. It changes their credit rating, and then that enables them to go out and buy a house at overvalued levels because it puts them in a different looking fiscal picture. But $10,000, a lot of people have a lot more debt than that, and the taxpayers have to pay it. You're absolutely right. It is inflationary.
yes. And like I say, some people believe that they're helping them, but there's not really a help because that basically bringing inflation in a higher level. So you can afford less items, as you were saying, with with the currency, you know. So, but I think it's gonna be very interesting when they bring these CBDCs because, like I say, I think instead of bringing price control on rent, on food items, I think they're just basically gonna program the currency however they want it, and basically that's we have to follow whatever they say under that program. Of course, like you said at the beginning, it's gonna be a friendly. Everybody will like it. Everybody think it's gonna be the best
Free
UBI.
money. Hmm.
Yes, free money. But and then at the end, when people start realizing, wait a minute, I'm only allowed to buy only one item, so I don't have the freedom that I can buy as many as I want, as we do it now. That's when people start waking up and realize what it is. You know, it's all about taking control over your and your liberties, because at the end, that's what it is. You know, it's taking your freedom.
So, what do you think would have happened? I mean, I know that in Venezuela they made an attempt at a CBDC, but it gets
Yeah.
very local. I mean, aren't a lot of people bartering?
Well, the way they did it in Venezuela, they came out with that. It's called Petro. It's a cryptocurrency, whatever they call it, and it's backed up by oil. But of course, nobody believed it. Nobody had confidence on it, so it never worked. I don't know anybody that use it. I think if they use it, they use it for to pay for like driver's license or that kind of services with the government. Anything that is associated with the government because they do take it. But in a daily basis, I don't think anybody use that. That's a failure program.
You know, it's interesting because they had a similar kind of result. Not that nobody used it, but China tried to first saying, oh, yeah, well, we'll just work side by side with the other private cryptocurrencies. And that didn't last very long. That dialogue didn't last very long. So, you know, I hope that it's hard for people to adopt it. But I also hope that we have other choices outside of it. Because you make a really valid point about people having putting value in dollars when the dollar.
It's losing purchasing power as well. Yeah, I try to explain that to my near family members so they can understand it, and they have to see other ways to start trying to save their purchasing power, their savings, which is gold, silver. You
Right.
know,
I was going to ask you, how easy is it to get gold and silver in Venezuela right now?
it's not that hard. However, when the crisis was really bad in Venezuela, the hyperinflation were in the highest level, a lot of people opt for touring their gold and jewelry, trying to survive. So definitely those items work. They were the ones who actually saved some people, you know what I mean, by putting meal in their table. But those were just jewelry that people had as a middle class, you know. They were not with the purpose of save money or
So, like jewelry and things like
yeah,
that.
exactly, yes. But
Well,
they didn't have it because of that purpose. They used to have it because they used to wear them.
right.
But when the hyperinflation were in the highest level, people start turning those in for money so they can purchase food. Uh, but I think the major thing during hyperinflation is when we go into liquidity crisis, which is basically when the lenders basically don't give out any loans, and that's happening right now in Venezuela. There is no banking system as far as getting loans. So if you would like to purchase a home or vehicle, it has to be done in cash. There is no finance at all. And that's because of the level of inflation is basically way higher than the interest rates, which is happening right now here in America. I don't understand how is it possible. Our last CPI was 8.2, 8.1, I believe,
Yep.
and we still have some mortgage rate below, under that. I don't understand how they keep doing it because
It's
it's
an
way under
illusion.
the inflation rate. So it
Well,
doesn't make sense to me.
did you see? It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to me either, especially since they juggle all of the numbers too. So you do really think it was 8.1 or 8.2? But they have to keep the illusion going. Although I saw mortgage rates have now in this country breached 6%. But the advantage that we have are 30-year fixed mortgages,
Well,
right?
they now become even more creative as far as mortgage. I happened to talk to one lender last week. Now they have a 40 years mortgage, and they are offering now interest only for the first 10 years. And then the following year is when you start actually kicking to the principal. So they come in creative with different products, trying to keep the housing market alive. But when we're talking about almost because 6% is the entry level rate for someone who has an excellent credit. But if for someone who is average, trying to buy their first home, I think the interest rate is around 7.5, if,
I think you're probably
and
right.
it could be higher
Hmm.
because the 10-year um, treasury, I think, was almost 4% yesterday. I was looking at it, 3.9 something, very, very close to 4. I haven't checked them today, but as you know, that's how the mortgage rate go by.
It's true. And in England, there are a lot of products that have just like that, disappeared from the shelf,
Yes.
right? So we're already seeing that pullback. And that's what happened in 2008 with the subprime crisis. I mean, liquidity dried up in 24 hours. And so just today, we saw the Bank of England go from tightening to now going into the bond market and turning around. And they don't want to call it QE because QE original's intention was to develop inflation, grow inflation, and this is about saving the children, saving the pension plans. So, but it's the same thing. What do you think, looking around, and with your experience from Venezuela, you know, do you think that the central banks are going to, and governments, and actually there was a report that I just did a little while ago on basically the globe, so through the IMF, it was an IMF report, eliminating the independence of the central bank so that the central bank and government can work hand in hand to, I don't know to do what. They'll say to fight inflation, but did you see that in Venezuela as too, where that independence from the central bank is just eliminated?
During hyperinflation, there is no independent institutions. They all work for the government, including the central bank. I believe right now, even here in the United States, I believe the Federal Reserve work with the government. They try to pretend that they're independent, but if you see the narrative, thinking about it, and then they come out with we're gonna go to a soft landing. Now the narrative is about we're gonna have some pain. that they're trying to control back inflation to 2%, which is, I don't think they're going to be able to do that.
No. But what
And
do you
definitely,
think? But what do you think about the IMF actually coming out and talking about the elimination of the independent central bank on a global basis, not just a localized basis? What does, from your experience, what does that tell you?
well, they need to bring confidence back to from people, because when confidence is being lost, especially right now that this is a global crisis, of course they have to come up with a new way to try to bring confidence from societies, and start believing back in the system. So I believe there is a way to for them to try to tell people that this time is gonna be different,
Oh, yeah, they always say that.
and keep us under the debt system that we have. Um, but at the end, it's the same. I think it's just basically another way to trying to, like I say, just trying to bring confidence. Because at the end, that's what we lose during monetary crisis. People lose confidence in the currency, so they rather to have anything besides paper.
Well, that's true. I'm when I look at that, what that tells me is that they're setting up the globe for a very nasty hyperinflationary event because, as you pointed out, in Venezuela, it was just one. They absolutely yes. I agree with you that the central banks are already working with the governments, but there is that thin line division that we are supposed to perceive as the central bank is independent. I've never in my long career, never, ever, ever have I seen a regulatory body like the IMF that's all treasury secretaries and central bank chiefs, that those are the members of almost every country on this planet. Never have I seen a body like that come out and talk about eliminating that division. They want to keep the perception that it's still separate, but they have to come up with new ways. Um, and that's the other thing. People always perceive that the powers that be, so the governments and the central banks, want things to remain the same, but maybe, and maybe you can relate this back to Venezuela. At what point, when a government and central bank acknowledge that this is the end, it's the end, it's the end of the system as we know it, the end of the currency as we know it, and just sort of say, okay, we've got the CBDCs here to take over. And much as they talk about not being ready yet, personally, I think that's garbage. They already have the Fed Now account in place. That's supposed to come out in next year, 2023. I mean, we have a lot of things that are shifting in 2023. LIBOR to SOFR, so like 600 trillion contracts. Did those all get derivative contracts? Did those all get reset by now? I mean, I don't know. There's a lot of things that are happening in 2023. Could this really just be the support for the last bit of, like, would you say Venezuela's in a hyperinflationary depression?
I Yes, definitely, it is still there. Yes. Some
So,
people are trying right now to advertise that there is a recovery in the country, but I don't believe that. I still have family down there, and the economy is very tight. It's very hard to survive over there. I'm not saying people, every uh, family is still under the same situation, but definitely in general, yes, they are still in hyperinflation, in economy in depression.
so I think that maybe by that overtly eliminating that division, then we could see a global hyperinflationary depression, which would put enough pain on the population
You
potential.
remember me? They did something over there, which is they came out with it wasn't a digital currency, but it was a new ID that you must have in order for you, for example, if you want to put gas in your car with lower prices from the ones that subside the government, you must have that ID.
Oh, wow.
So that kind of brings me to the social credit scores that is associated with the CBDC
Right?
currency. So they did have something similar. So if you wanted to have any benefits coming out of the government, you have to have that ID. As far as currency, they don't use, I mean, very barely cash in Venezuela. Most of the transactions are done with debit cards or credit cards, which is to me digital currency. It's just basically, in a way, it's just a card and
Right.
everybody just use it, but it's digital. The government control the amount of money on a daily basis that you can transfer. So there's a maximum. And funny, this happened to me, I think like 3 weeks ago. I was in the bank. I happened to do some withdrawal out of my account. And I was looking at my transactions and I see a penalty fee on my bank account. So I called the bank and found out about this fee because I never overdraft. So what was the issue with it? So apparently, for that type of account that I had, I only allowed to pull this amount of money. Otherwise, I started kicking the penalty fee at that point.
Yeah.
So that was something that took my attention when that happened to me. So it's not like they're telling you you can't pull that limit, but they start actually charging you if you want to pull over that limit. I didn't know that, of course. I found out because I was looking at my bank statement.
That's, I've been watching what we can do in our banking system, especially since 2008. Really just, and they do it in a stealth move, more and more and more narrow. And if you get something in the mail, there's like a little one sheet glossy thing that makes whatever the changes that they're going to do seem like a no big dealer until you go to your bank and you find that it's gotten a whole lot harder to wire transfer funds. They ask you all of these questions. They're very intrusive. They have all of these excuses. Yeah,
And it's very important that people understand that liquidity crisis is not just about people getting loans or finances. It also is about your savings or your bank accounts because when those things happens, it happened in Venezuela at different times where they closed completely the bank system and basically you were not allowed to pull any money out of your accounts. So those things happens. Some people don't believe, but in Venezuela it happened. So at one point we will see it.
oh, we will definitely see it. I really consider this conversation that I had with Alejandro to be extraordinarily important for you to understand what's coming. And I hope you enjoyed part one of his Boots on the Ground series. Now, part two will be coming out on Thursday, and you don't want to miss that. And as always, just to keep you well informed so that you can make educated choices, we will continue to discuss the hyperinflationary parallels and the pieces that the normal person missed in our Boots on the Ground series moving forward from all around the world.